adjust your focus a little bit.
You want to sit here? I'll sit here.
You flashing them?
You sit over here.
Trying. They're
Scoot over.
yelling at me. I guess I can get out of my laid down.
Pizza and a man boppy.
Huh?
You know those little baby things that are like boppies?
Yes.
It looks like you're in a boppy.
I feel like I'm in a boppy. I need a boppy. I like that word.
Oh, yeah.
That's just fun to say.
Boppy.
Where's
Yeah.
my boppy?
Is that what you call it, a boppy?
Yeah, I'm
I could get to feeling all kinds of spoiled with a boppy.
Can we push the ottoman that way?
So you have get down and over.
Can we push the ottoman that way?
No.
Or I can get it out totally out of here.
No, it's
She's just
fine.
letting me know what's in the shot, so I know
So she
where
stays
I can
out of
go.
it.
So I stay out of it.
Oh, okay. Very good.
And whenever you guys are ready, go ahead.
We're here at Lockwood's house in Colorado Springs, hanging out in the living room here on a beautiful sunny afternoon. It's, what is it, April 2nd? I believe it is. We've got Clinton here, Rebecca.
Hi.
You want to tell us a little bit about your family and your situation that we're here to talk about?
Yes.
Film? What's going on around here?
Calvin, my son, who is 15, got his red card after we discovered that he had femoral retroversion and that he was in a great deal of pain. He was hitting his legs and biting until he broke the skin, and we kept being told it's behavioral, it's just a behavior. We took him to the doctor over and over, and they said he's just behavioral. And we said, well, he's in an ABA therapy center getting behavior therapy, so I don't know, really what else we can do. We're in the top-notch center that they have here, so we dealt with it, and finally, we found a chiropractor that said you need to go see this orthopedic surgeon who evaluated Calvin and said that, Calvin has a long road ahead of him, to get all of this straightened out. And that after, evaluating him and observing and checking everything out, that he did believe that Calvin was in a significant amount of pain. So, hi, Calvin.
You want to sit here? You want to sit here?
I think he wants you. I think he was saying help. He says, he says help, but it sounds like go.
Oh, okay.
So he was on oxycodone. Well, first he was on Tylenol 3 and another pain pill that worked for like 3 days. And after the third day, it was like he was hitting again and biting. And the oxycodone seemed to help with pain, but it made him very uncomfortable. He cried. He would whisper. And he still wasn't sleeping. It's not uncommon for Calvin to go 2 days with no sleep.
Oh, easy.
No nap, no, 30-minute doze off. He was just up, and he was wired, and he was, ready to go. Even right now, with how up he is, he was put under sedation for an EEG this morning, and they said he'll be completely sedated for several hours. And as you can see, he's
not the case.
not so much.
Would
I
not
did
agree
just
with
give him
them,
some
no.
cannabis oil, so it should be kicking in about 20, 25 minutes here.
No,
Yeah. So that's how we obtained a red card for him, was because he had pain, which really is a shame that he qualifies for pain. But before the pain, running around, beating his head until it bled, biting himself, puncturing his skin. I mean, I've shown you guys pictures. Horrible, horrible self-injurious behavior. He was super aggressive. He wasn't sleeping. He was taking off at night, and we backed to a 4-lane road. The whole thing was just really dangerous. And, for autism not to be considered a life-debilitating condition is beyond me. It really
It's
is.
incomprehensible. I mean,
It is.
without a doubt. Only politicians can be capable of excluding something like that. That's fortunately there are a lot of people that are able to get
You
their.
need help? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Get their certification with the chronic pain. It's certainly how a lot of people in Michigan do it as well. Now, red card in Colorado. What's red card all about in Colorado here? That's a medical card essentially.
Yes, this is a medical card. It had to have 2 doctors sign for it. That wasn't, well, it was a little bit of a problem. Nobody really wanted to go out on a limb and sign for Calvin. But Rebecca really handled all this as far as this red card stuff goes. and she was able to find a couple doctors that were willing to do it, and they were more than happy to do it. And the funny thing is, after we found those 2 doctors, we found another doctor just recently when we were at Calvin's, what was that appointment for? His GI issues. And that was, gosh, I think 2 weeks ago, and he was very, very pro cannabis, and I was quite surprised. As a matter of fact, he was even asking for Rebecca's phone number to refer another patient to. So that was really good. But yeah, this is. From what you guys can see here on the camera here, it looks like he's very, high strung, and of course he just came from EEG, so he has this hyperness to him, and this feeling where he has to have, I guess, OCD, and he has to do certain things in a certain way, and I understand that's behavioral too, but that helps with that as well as his pain conditions and just the general welfare of our household. I mean, we're at a point where, if you guys could pan around the camera here, there's so many holes in our house. And he ate a carpet constantly, eats carpet, eats drywall, paint, his hat, anything he can eat, and this helps bring it down. So the kind of the issue that I'm running into, though, with the cannabis, however, is that if we give him like an all-strain type medicine, it's harder for him to get medicated. So we're figuring that maybe if we use different strains, just a certain strain, not a wide range of strains, just the certain strains of oil, and if we're able to, play seesaw with that, that would actually help him out.
So when you've got multiple strains mixed together in one batch, then it seems to be less effective overall?
Well,
or less as potent overall? Or
for the duration of the product that we will use. I mean, we talked about this earlier,
Sure.
that it seemed like they got to a point where all the cannabinoids were filling up, I guess. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but it wasn't as effective. And of course, we bought quite a bit of it.
Right.
So we were
like we
using
talked
it.
about before, it had good effect in the beginning, but it started to decline. After
decline.
a
So
period
we're
of time.
thinking.
Sure.
I'm thinking in my own brain that maybe that's not the answer. Maybe if we can get something that has more of a certain strain, and then we can just go from strain to strain of the oils. But I'm still.
Well, and it's pretty much a trial and error thing. And while you've got some experience based on the last several months you've been on the oil, you're definitely still dialing things in. So
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Always making adjustments and monitoring But another thing, any autism mom will tell you that when you're doing any kind of treatment that's an antioxidant as strong as cannabis is, that your kids are going to go into detox. And I believe wholeheartedly with the way that his bowel movements were. I mean, he lost 9 pounds. He just went through a total detox on cannabis. A lot of the protocols that we do, like the Biomed moms, there's a few camps of autism moms,
Sure.
but the Biomed moms, we're looking for detoxes. It's a constant detox. We're trying to eliminate toxins, and kids with autism have all kinds of gut issues. Leaky gut syndrome is very common with them. Gluten intolerance, casein, all of that stuff. It's very, very common.
Now, I got to say, myself, my wife, Jen behind the camera there, we've all been staying here the last few days, obviously. We've spent several hours with you and the children and the family here. And certainly there's an ongoing sense around here, but there's been no major episodes or ordeals like we've heard story after story from talking to you and seeing pictures of and stuff. So I guess what I'm leading into, if you want to give us a little description of the night and day difference, or if it is a night and day difference.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
yeah, absolutely.
Before cannabis oil to now,
Well, he sleeps. He sleeps at night, and that just, if it were just sleep, I would take it. If it, not the added communication and, him being able to understand things better and all of that stuff. If it were just the sleep, I'd take it, because we couldn't sleep at night. One of us had to be with him. He was eloping. He'd come in through the living room door from our deck at 1 o'clock in the morning. He would just take off, and one of us had to stay awake. and if we fell asleep, there was no peace.
24/7.
It was
365.
24/7. So
Sure.
he was sleeping through the night. It was just so nice to be able to rest and get sleep. And he clearly wasn't in pain anymore. He would hit the insides of his legs, so he was constantly bruised here, and he would hit his hips. And when he was in pain or something was going on and having an episode, he would clip the side of the couch, the frame here, while he was running, and wouldn't even phase him. The pain from hitting it so hard that there was a bruise this big would not even phase him. So he was covered in bruises, before.
On his arms, and of course, from hitting his head, he hit his head, and it got so bad where it was actually a callus.
Wow.
He doesn't grow hair right at his hairline because it's just scar tissue. But it's just been years, of him beating his head.
Sure.
So those episodes, we were having a conservative estimate would be 2 hours a day of restraining him. We had a spot in the basement where he had no access to any walls. Well, yeah, 2 hours is pretty conservative, but every day. This is every day, and
Right.
we're wrapping him in blankets, and we're holding him down, and we're getting hurt. And he's escaping from us and getting hurt and putting his head through the wall and biting himself and flooding the house. And he flooded the house 60 times plus, at least 60 times, from December of 2012 to December of 2013.
Unbelievable.
Constant. His anxiety was so bad, he just flushed anything that made him feel nervous,
Yes, but
no
this,
matter what it was.
cannabis has definitely brought a lot of that down for us, and
Yeah.
it really helps out.
Since we've been here, we've come and gone at all hours and so on and so forth. And, in the nighttime is the peace time around here.
Right.
And without a doubt, at least you guys are allowed a few hours of rest. The sleeplessness alone is enough to drive somebody to insanity.
Oh, absolutely.
Not to mention the severity of everything you're dealing with every day. 2 hours of restraining your own child. As a parent, that's the heart wrenching. I can only imagine the
It
emotions.
does.
It
breaks
broke
your
us
heart. It
daily.
just breaks your heart completely.
daily. Yeah.
Now, we certainly haven't seen any need to restrain or anything else. You guys are masters at averting, changing
Sure.
the subject,
Absolutely,
changing
yeah.
the situation. And while we've seen a little bit of rambunctiousness at best, there's been no real deal. We've been here for 4 days now. And I got to say, there's a certain amount of peace that's in the household by comparison.
Oh, absolutely.
Night and day.
Big change. Big
we,
change.
we wouldn't want to even wake up. It was just the feeling of hopelessness. You can't really shake it, and you're laying there, and you wake up and think, oh gosh, here we go again. We got to do this all over again.
We would
It's
drive
just-
the
it was
boys to therapy,
so hard.
and Calvin would beat his head
One-
so hard on
yeah, we
the
had to
on the
sit
van window. It was a window that didn't open. He would beat his head so hard we could see outside.
Daylight as it
Because
goes
that's
out.
how hard he was hitting his head, and we'd have to pull over and restrain him. And other parents would pull up next to us and say, "Hey, what's going on? You having, car trouble?" We're like, "No, we're holding Calvin,"
Right,
and
right.
he was hurting his brother who also has autism, and it was hard. It was like we'd restrain him and hold him and be late to therapy and then show up, and we were a mess, and we'd drop him off, and we'd drive home and cry the whole way home because it was like, what are we going to do?
Trying to forget those
Really,
memories.
like, what are we going to do? What can we do? Because we couldn't continue. We couldn't,
Sure. Well, and I think in this case, it's pretty obvious that this is going to be an ongoing thing. This isn't something that we're going to clear away in a couple months and life's
Right.
going to go back to peaches and cream. But at the same time, you've got a drastic change in freedom, ability to sleep, your lifestyle. I can just imagine the bags that were under your eyes when you were running 24/7.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know what you go through now, or I've seen what you've gone through in the last 4 days, and there's no parent out there that envies you now, believe me. I guess let's go through where did you start with dosage? That's one of the common things that everybody wants to know about. What kind of amounts or strains or so a little bit of that trial and error that you're going through now.
Okay.
Obviously, you've had some great success with cannabis oil, but it hasn't been all peaches and cream either.
Right.
So what's going on there, and what kind of things you are doing to adjust your doses?
Well, when we started with Calvin, the day that he was legal, I went to a dispensary and I bought him an edible. And it was a 70 milligram edible. It was indica edible. And I cut it up into 8 pieces and I gave it to him. And an hour later, he started he was watching Elmo and Grouchland on TV, which he's seen literally a million times. And he started saying the words that they were saying while they were saying it. And we were looking at each other.
He's nonverbal. He doesn't speak. Maybe he had 5 words at one point, and he's able to identify things. And he talks through a augmentative device, basically an iPad that has vocabulary inputted into it. And that's how he really spoke to us. And he'd pick up on some words from using that device through his autistic center there that he's going to. But the drastic change that we saw with his vocabulary was really an eye-opener. We were just amazed.
It was immediate.
And it's still compounding.
Well, it had to instantly reaffirm, I mean, as a parent, to actually cross that line of, okay, we're going to give our child cannabis. It's not something that I'm sure you just woke up one day and said, what the hell,
No, yeah.
So that had to reaffirm and give you some belief in that you made the right decision at that point.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was instantly, I mean, on the first
The first dose.
Wow.
The first dose, he was saying things, simultaneously with the movie, and we were just so happy. And we're 6.5 months into treatment, and now what we're seeing as this, has progressed is that we'll be having a conversation, and he won't be engaged in our conversation at all. He's not looking at us.
Yeah.
He's not interested. And if you were to look at him, he looks totally, completely zoned into what he's doing, like he has no idea what you're discussing. But if we say birthday or Costco or Natural Grocer, now he looks up and says Natural Grocer or Costco.
Yeah, it was almost, for a while we were, we talk amongst each other and we have no problem. All of a sudden now we got to watch what we're saying because he's tuning in.
We do. We have to be careful with what we say.
A good problem.
Because if we say Natural Grocers and if we're not ready to go and he hears it, then
we got to go.
we're going to have
with that being said, with every step forward, I'm sure there's another set of challenges, so to speak. So, it's a positive thing, but it's a constant learning curve. I mean, life's changed a lot around here.
Yeah, his mind is opened
really
up
has.
with it, which is
absolutely.
That wasn't an expected outcome. It really wasn't, and I think now maybe something's firing in there a little differently, and he's getting a little more understanding of his surroundings. And of course now he wants to talk more, and he's not gonna be able to express himself as much because he has his new ideas in his head. So that's a little bit of a challenge now. But yeah,
What kind
it's
of
a good problem
expectations
to have.
did you have before you started this?
Hold on,
Hold on
guys.
1 second. The mic's here and you keep moving your head that way.
Oh, we did that the other day.
You bad boy, Pete.
I'll do you right here.
Do you want us to back up on that?
Just whatever he asked you the last question that he asked you.
Somebody remind me.
You were just getting ready to say.
we were talking about what kind of change, what kind of expectations.
Oh, yeah. So, obviously he's already exceeded your expectations. Dose 1, cookie 1. I mean, that's got to be a little bit of a mind blower. I've seen some pretty
absolutely.
cool shit with cannabis oil, but that's
Right.
that's pretty awesome.
And he hasn't been incontinent since cannabis oil.
Wow.
He was incontinent
Wow,
at
yeah.
least once a day at therapy. We'd pick him up and he'd be holding a plastic bag with the clothes that he had an accident in. Not one time since.
So from
cannabis.
dose 1, he's been good to go.
Totally.
Wow. So I guess to go ahead and back up and ask that question again, before the first dose, what kind of expectations, or did you have any other autistic mothers that you had talked to, or was there anything to to go on, so to speak, or
I found a few stories online that parents were treating their kids who had another condition or something that qualified them to be a legal patient. None of the kids that I found were as self-injurious as Calvin was, except for a little boy named Alex that we found. The cannabis worked great for him for 3 months, and then the parents reported that it wasn't working anymore and that they pulled him off of it. And that was our big fear when Calvin went into detox, was that the oil doesn't work anymore. And it was like we made all of this progress, and he'd done so well, and everything was looking so good. And then, he got sick. And he's usually sick from Thanksgiving until Easter every year. Very, very sick. So he got sick like he usually does this time of year, and he lost weight like he usually does. He usually loses, 5 to 7 pounds. He lost 9 pounds. This is gross, but we could tell by the smell of his bowel movements that he was detoxing. We've done other detoxes, we know, and it was
there, right.
it was a hardcore detox that he went through, and he was not very happy during detox. And we thought, you know what, he's like the other little boys. He's going to do well for 3 months, and then the cannabis isn't going to work anymore. And we were just broken. We were devastated. I mean,
Sure.
this was like, we had so much hope, and then when we saw things happening, when we saw good things happening, it was hard to see him go backwards during detox. But to see him now, moving forward.
During the detox, I don't know how often you get blood work or lab work. Did you notice any raise in liver enzymes during that detox phase? And that, to clarify, that detox phase was from the cannabis oil, where the volume of his output was increased. We'll put it that way.
Right. And we weren't
now,
doing
were there any
other
raised liver
protocols.
enzymes or anything like that?
His AST and his ALT were elevated.
Okay, we've been through that with some other patients, as you well know, so that's
Yeah.
something that I want to bring up. It certainly seems to be something that we're seeing a pattern with, and,
Yeah.
regardless of condition. But with the pediatrics, there seems to be a raise in the liver enzymes, and I agree wholeheartedly that it seems to be a detox of sorts. So
Absolutely.
I think that's something that's important to recognize. I know we were alarmed more than once when we saw the raised enzymes. So
Oh, we
it's
were.
something to
We were
keep an
too.
eye on. And there's what kind of things, as long as we're talking about it, do you have any suggestions as far as did you use any milk thistle or how to address those raised liver enzymes or flushes or anything like that? Or
My mom sent me lemons from Arizona, so I would squeeze them in water and wake him up in the middle of the night and have him drink it, so I know it would sit there on an empty stomach for a while. We did buy milk thistle. We didn't use it. So that's
on.
really all we
Right on.
did.
But they came right back down to normal, or
They
did
did.
continue to spike? Or
No, we just got cleared that his enzymes were where they were supposed to be by his GI doctor about 2 weeks ago. So he's good.
So
And I
since-
knew they were going down by his behavior. I could tell that they were going
Right.
down. I wasn't alarmed or concerned anymore.
Gotcha. Cool. So dosage. Where did you start with dosage as far as how much, or THC, CBD? Where are you at now? Where do you think you're headed? That kind of thing.
Well, like she said, she was starting off with the candies at first, and what do they call it? A certain kind of candy. Was it candy?
That was I don't know if we're allowed to say that, are we?
Say whatever you want.
Okay. It was a green hornet. It was an indica. We cut it into 8 pieces, and that was the night that Calvin was saying the words with the movie. But after he said the words with the movie, he laughed so hard that it was hard for him to catch his breath. Now,
Yeah, that was his first experience.
now
Woohoo!
this is good,
Yeah.
but maybe it's a little too
Yeah,
good.
it was, we were like, of course, us, given a child.
More's not always better
you
than.
know,
I think it made him more
marijuana.
uncomfortable
Yeah, it was a
than
little
me. I
uncomfortable
was
for
just
me.
so
I'm like,
happy
oh,
to
God,
see
what am I
him
doing?
laughing and see him smiling. I was just like, yes, laugh until you cry.
Well,
Laugh
sure,
it out.
Sure.
I mean, you could just tell that he felt better. And autism is weird because it is a neurological disorder, but it doesn't get treated like an illness. It just gets treated like a behavior issue, and no one wants to deal with you. You know, people don't come over and bring chocolates and, you know, dinners or whatever when your kid gets diagnosed with autism. They stay away from you. We don't know a single family who doesn't have an issue with someone in their immediate family because of the way that they've treated their autistic child. It's
Wow.
just a totally different ballgame when you're talking about autism. It's not seen as an illness. There really isn't compassion. And I believe that Calvin has the right to live pain-free, to be happy, to be comfortable, to not have anxiety so bad that he's putting his head through the wall or biting
Just to
himself
grow and
until
learn.
we have to take him to the emergency room. It's like, you know, what we want is very simple. We just want him to have the same shot that other kids have. We want him to be able to be a kid and to sleep and to have peace and to be calm and to feel good.
Well, and to choose something as natural as cannabis,
Absolutely.
especially with hindsight, you know, I don't think there's any question that it's certainly a path you were intended to be on, you know, for lack of a better word. You know, so where are we headed? Where do you see yourself going here? You know, obviously supply is going to be a lifetime issue.
Yes.
You know,
We are up.
things of this nature.
We're up to 320 milligram doses every 4 waking hours
And that's the oil,
of oil, of cannabis oil.
cannabis oil.
So, but when I say that, I don't want people to dose that way because a lot of the moms that I network with use a much smaller amount. And we've tried. We tried to go down. We thought, okay, well, maybe we're giving them too much. We can't go down. We
Right,
can't.
right.
We just can't.
Well, and I think just as an oil maker's from my perspective, when we're dealing with pediatrics, you know, you got to start small, so to speak. You know, we go conservative,
Absolutely.
and we work our way up. You know, and depending on the condition, you know, if we've got a stage 4 brain tumor patient that's on their last legs, we're going for broke. I mean,
Right.
You know, but obviously in this case, you've got an ongoing treatment plan that you're working with, and it's going to be fluctuating as you go. And as
Right.
you go, you're gaining experience, time with him on this oil, this dose, that dose, and I'm sure with all that. Certainly influences where you're going.
Oh, absolutely. Like when
Um,
we started, 8 milligrams was too much. So we cut it down to 4. And that was
Beautiful.
good for about a week. And then it needed to be upped. And
And where's he at now then again?
we give him 320 milligrams every 4 hours, 4 waking hours.
Now is that 320 milligrams of THC then?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's clarified.
And then of course there's some of the other cannabinoids in
Right.
there at much smaller levels, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Now we know without a doubt that you know there's varying ratios for different conditions and different children and so on. But I guess to get right to it, have you tried some CBD strains? Was it a negative effect, or
We
has
have.
it? You know, and not to give CBD a bad rap, but in this case, I'd like to warn that it's possible with autistic children that CBD is a bad gig here, right?
Right. I've heard of a
You
few
know.
parents that a really rich CBD oil has made their kids upset. They see behaviors. It doesn't seem like it calms them. That's the case with Calvin. We have gone back and forth, I don't know, 6 times, you know, wanting to add more CBD in, and kind of going back and forth and saying, okay, are we missing something, especially
Well,
during
sure. And
detox,
a lot of
I
times
thought,
it's about those ratios, you know?
right. So, but every time we do, we just go back to just a good hybrid oil. You need
Now, supply. You know, that's a significant amount of oil per day. There's obviously a cost to that. Are you comfortable discussing the cost of that? How much does it cost for a month of his medicine?
over 1,000.
That's certainly a small price to pay for what you're getting, though, I would think.
Right.
You know. What kind of, you've already mentioned that the feeling of hopelessness with the 2-3 hours a day of restraining and rambunctious, you know, the battles, the fights and all this. And you mentioned a little bit about the hope that you're able to see with cannabis. I guess what kind of hope do you have? What do you see in the future for him as far as later this year, 5 years from now? How much? How much do you think you can accomplish with cannabis in Calvin?
I think we can do pretty well. The situation we're having right now, as I said before, is that the strains, one batch will do great initially for quite a while, and then as we get to the bottom of the bottle, so to speak, it doesn't have the same potency. So
Or it's just not as effective.
yeah, it's just not as effective. Sorry,
He's
and
used to it.
so yeah, he gets used to it, and so we're thinking that maybe we just need to have a certain strain without being a multiple strain, just one certain strain of oil, and then we'll go to a different strain, and then a different strain, and we'll go back, and then
Stay ahead.
rotate
Stay ahead of it.
rotate.
Sure.
Yeah, and so we don't want to buy these huge amounts like we were before. But that also has a challenge too, because we have to place an order, and then we have to wait for it, and so we're still trying to figure this out. There's no roadmap for us to to follow, and Rebecca's always trying to figure out ratios and tweak things and do things here and there, and she's done very well in managing his medicines. So that's what I think we need to do, is we need to maybe produce our own or buy some and make it. But the problem is that the place we're buying the oils from is the price is so good, and it's hard to go out and buy something and make it, and it gets just a syringe.
Well, if it's
full.
not broke, you don't fix it. Let's put it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
you're doing good with what you have. You trust your source, and you're more than welcome to discuss your source and not discuss your source. But
Calvin, sit next to me.
it's all good.
His jaw's shaking still from that. He's having waves of that medicine that they put him under.
Yeah. It still has a little bit of effect from the AEG medicine, the anesthesia.
You need help? What do you want? Tell me. You need help?
You want to tell us a little bit about the iPad there?
Oh, the iPad. This is his augmentative device. He uses this for talking.
I know you're going to say nice, but you have to wait.
Frozen or something right now.
There was no telling him wait before. Ugh. He
Oh,
has this thing he has to
Four-letter
wear.
word.
It's rotation straps around his legs to pull his legs out. And when we would bend down in front of him to put him on, he would headbutt us like full force. We had to stop doing
Wow.
it. It was just, you couldn't say wait, you couldn't say no, you couldn't say anything. As a matter of fact, our caseworker told us, came over after cannabis and said, wow, we can all talk. Like before, we'd have to go in the kitchen and we'd have to whisper. If we even spoke to where he could hear our voices, he was hurting himself.
Wow.
It was so bad. Literally, we couldn't talk.
you're happy, huh?
And now you're able to take him to the store,
Oh,
go out to
absolutely.
the restaurant.
I just asked people
So
to pray for
personal
us.
freedom
We do.
alone for him is,
Nice.
or his boundaries, I should say, have certainly been expanded. You
Oh
know?
yeah.
That's pretty awesome all by
Oh, you want
itself.
E?
We can take a break for a little bit.
Take a break.
Yeah, we'll take a break.
All right, take a
As soon as you.
Turn on.
Just pretend there's no camera in here. Just talking to Pete and Christy and everyone. Yeah, that's what I do. I just pretend there is no-
I'm ready when you are.
We took a little break, and we're back here with Rebecca and her daughter Drew. Rebecca, you want to go ahead and let us know, introduce the family. We never did introduce the whole family. You got 3 beautiful children here, and a husband.
Yes.
Let us know what we got going here.
I've got my daughter Drew. I also have a 13-year-old son named Colin, and he also has autism, and my husband Clint.
Drew here. I had the opportunity to have a little conversation with you. I think it was this morning or yesterday morning, and I couldn't help but be impressed with how well adjusted you are, and how positive you were, and how supportive you were of your mother and your father, and you're a very mature young lady. And while there's certainly some challenges going on around this house, there's certainly a lot of love and a lot of positive things going on. You've got some good things going on. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on in your life. I know you're going to school, you're going to cosmetology, you're working. What's going on with you?
Yeah, in the morning I go to beauty school, and then I go there from 9 to 12, and then I go to high school, and then after I usually have work. But in between, sometimes I usually like to take my brothers out to eat or something just to help out.
Sure. The morning I was able to spend a little time with you. You were helping Colin get ready. You drove him to his school, and had some plans to stop at Jack in the Box or one of the restaurants or something like that. How was it from your perspective growing up in a household with two autistic brothers, and obviously your mom's time has got a high demand on it, and so on. What goes on in your world?
I used to not like it very much because I felt like I didn't get a lot of attention, but I realized I don't need as much attention as they really do. So I just realized that if I help more, everything will come together better, and I don't need to be jealous or anything because they need more attention and help than I do. So I'm happy to help. It makes me happy to know that I can help my family and support them.
Sure.
And she's very helpful because she really understands them. So, she feels comfortable. She knows what to do. She knows how things run, and.
Well, sure. I mean, even just being here a few days myself, I mean, the first day you don't know how to act or react, or is it okay to take something out of their hand, or talk to them? You don't know what to do, and it's ignorance. And you certainly try to be as comfortable as you can and act as natural as possible. But it's hard not to be aware that of the potential for what could happen. And on that note, I guess obviously you guys have been through some pretty major episodes with the boys and stuff. You've been here for some of that. You're not a real big girl, I certainly don't view your brothers as violent or anybody that wants to hurt anybody or anything. But there's some certain risks there as well. How do you handle that?
It's really hard to handle it when my brother's freaking out. We can't really do anything to stop it. It's pretty hard. Sometimes we try to keep him from hurting himself, but it's hard. Like the other day, we had to call 911 because he was putting his head through the walls, and me and my mom were trying to restrain him, and he tried to bite my jacket, and he bit it really hard, and if he would have bit my skin, it would have hurt really bad, so we just have to be careful for stuff like that. But we're more worried about him hurting himself than him hurting us. That's why we step in and try to stop. But it's hard.
Now, obviously he's still having some episodes and some bad days and some things of this nature. But since the cannabis oil, it's been reduced by a great deal.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
His quality of life is up completely, 100%, since he started that.
I don't know how to word it. I guess how often would he have episodes before compared to now, or how much?
He would probably have an episode about once a day before the oil, and now it's maybe twice a week. About.
And the episodes are much less severe,
Oh yeah.
and they don't turn into. We refer to episodes as a full blown head through the wall, blood, and we have had maybe 3 of those other than detox since starting cannabis.
Wow.
Yeah. The first 2 months, we went 14 days without a single self-injurious behavior. And then he had one on day 14 or 15. And we thought, what's going on? Is the oil not working? And then he went another 13 days without a single self-injurious behavior. And then he went into detox, and that was rough. His behaviors went up, as I said. But since coming off of detox, he's had one in the last 3 weeks, and that was the 911 call. It was a really severe episode after a great day. He had such a great day. We were actually taking pictures of him because he was so healed up. Because that's how you know how Calvin's doing. You just look at him.
And the number of bruises and
Right.
injuries and marks and
Bite marks and bruises and swelling and knots, and whether or not there's a scab on the knot. That's how you know how he's doing. And the holes in the walls, if everything's patched and if Calvin looks good, he's doing good. So he's on, I think, day 19 right now with no self-injurious behaviors. He
Nice.
had a small bite on one of his arms. It didn't break the skin, and it was more of a ritual that he was doing.
I think the most severe thing we've witnessed since we've been here was he banged his head on the wall one time this morning, and it was averted as fast as it happened, and he was as happy as could be.
Yeah.
And that's as severe as I've witnessed in 4 days or 5 days or whatever it's been. And I guess all I'm trying to say is the way you described his daily behavior from before to what I witness now is it's almost hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I've seen the pictures. I don't doubt it one
Yeah.
bit. And I'm certainly not trying to dwell on how bad it was before, but trying to point out that there's really a difference in quality of life here, not just for Calvin, but for his brother, for his sister, for mom, for dad. There's got to be a sense of I can at least take a deep breath once in a while.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know?
I'm still prepared for anything at any time.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm constantly prepared. I don't know if Calvin will stop having episodes completely. I hope that, as we go along and as we, change ratios and doses to find his sweet spot at the time, and then sometimes that changes. Sometimes I've found his sweet spot and then it changes. Maybe he needs a little more. Maybe too much is built up and, we need to, drop it down or, just
Sure.
whatever
Well,
we have to do.
And obviously, you got a lot of variables there as well. Between his hormone levels with puberty, and,
Absolutely.
his diet, or there's a lot of things going on there that are going to influence behavior and reactions and so on. I got to assume.
Absolutely.
What other things have you tried? I mean, one of the things that I think stands out the most to me about you as a mother and your treatment choices, not just now with cannabis that brings us here, but in the past, there's not a history of the pharmaceuticals like there are with a lot of other
No.
pediatric cases, and especially with autistic children. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and your path and your decisions and why you went the way you did?
Yes, we have tried so many different things. We started seeing a DAN doctor, and DAN stands for Defeat Autism Now. And we were doing that in 2004 before they took insurance. It was $500 to walk in just for an appointment per kid. It was a 9-month wait. So every time there was something new, we got on board and did it. We did the diet. It was effective. We've done different things. The best spot we've ever gotten Calvin to was 2010, 2011, and 2012. He was just thriving. He was doing great. We put him in this ABA therapy center that was awesome. It was behavior therapy. It's all one-on-one. There's a board-certified behavior analyst on site at all times, where some centers do a phone consult once a month. She's on site, and they worked with him, and they really did decrease his behavior significantly. He just progressed so well there. He was like their poster child until puberty hit. And when puberty hit, it was his anxiety crippled him. He could not function. He literally couldn't function. His anxiety was so high, he would break things and flush them because he figured out after a few times of throwing things away that we could pull him out of the garbage. And he would shake because he was so anxious. The anxiety just took him over. He could not function. So he'd flush things and flood the house, and then he'd beat his head, and he was upset that he was flooding the house. He would show us, look, and then he'd get upset and hit his head, and, we tell him, it's okay. It's not okay to flood the house, but I'm not going to punish him for it. He had anxiety.
Sure.
And we just thought we'd push through with therapy, and we tried different things. We restricted, if we added no corn to his gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free diet. We said no corn and no. There was something else that we ruled out. We saw a little bit of improvement there.
Did you find yourself being criticized for some of these choices, or were you ever pressured into maybe some farm? I mean, to play devil's advocate, there's a certain amount of people that are going to say, we've got a child that's upset and full of anxiety. Why don't we give them something to calm them down?
Right,
You know?
absolutely. Right.
I'm trying to, maybe address that a little bit
Yes,
while we're going
I
through
totally
this.
understand how people would see that and think, gosh, you should have given him something to help him. But I'm too tied into the autism community. I've seen too many kids be put on too many meds and end up institutionalized. I just got a call a month ago from a sister of a 22-year-old man, and they wanted to know if I knew of a place to take him for detox because he was on so many meds and he had so many med interactions. He was too violent. No one would take him. And, I've seen other kids go down that road. We have a family member who has tics from medication. It just didn't feel
In other words, by looking at these other children, you could see the future of what the pharmaceuticals had to offer you.
Right.
And I don't think it's hard to figure out that they start with this drug and then that loses effectiveness and they add this one and then there's a side effect and then they're on
absolutely.
this. And exactly as you described with that 22-year-old,
Right. And
you
you
get to
do.
a point where you've got to flush everything out and start over again.
Right.
And here you've got a young man that's so foobarred, for lack of a better word, that
Yeah.
nobody even wants to deal with him.
Right.
So I've got to commend you for your choice to stand up and resist that, especially understanding a little bit of the challenges that you face along the way with all these episodes or so on. You had to be tempted to at least dope them up at some point.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
guess,
Absolutely.
So
But
it's-
long term, we knew that wasn't a long term answer.
sure.
And because he's nonverbal, I was afraid with the oxycodone, that just scared him. He would, do you remember?
One time I went downstairs when he was on the oxycodone. It was like maybe his third day on it. And I went downstairs, and he usually never talks. Like, you know that. He doesn't talk. I went downstairs because I just had a weird feeling. So I just went to go check on him. And he was just sitting there in the corner with his blanket, and he was whispering to me. He was saying, all done, I'm all done, all done. That's all he kept saying. And he was shaking, and his eyes were huge, and I felt so bad for him. I went and I got him water. I came and woke up my mom. I was like, he can't take this anymore.
I call that a chemical zombie state.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
scared
and,
him.
And it not just with autistic children or children alone. I mean, there's such an overprescription of so many drugs in so many circumstances that there's people that would have never found themselves in the grips of addiction or swaddled up in a corner praying to die or I mean, it's horrific some of the effects these chemicals can have on us, and to not understand what's really going on with somebody like Calvin and how things are really firing or misfiring or not, how much can they really understand about these drugs and how it affects that as well,
Right.
Now, we've got a child that didn't show a lot of progress as far as being nonverbal or communication for a long time, that with cannabis has made some pretty large leaps and bounds from what I understand. You want to tell us a little bit about the progress he's made there?
As far as language goes?
Yes,
Language
communication-wise.
language is the hardest thing to acquire. There's a lot of protocols where people see behaviors decrease. They see self-stimulatory behaviors decrease, but language is the hardest one to get. So I'm not sure what's going on with, how the oil is doing this, but Calvin's language has really exploded, and his cognition it's just night and day from before. Like I was saying before, if we say something, he looks over and repeats it, where before he was so isolated and so into his own thing, you could say anything in front of him and it didn't matter.
He makes
But
eye contact now. He used to never make eye contact. You used to say something to him, wouldn't even face him. He would just look off. And after you say, like, Calvin, he'll just look right at you.
we would hold his face and say, Calvin, look at me.
And he would
And
look
his
off.
corner, his face would be right here because I was holding it, and his eyes.
There's no
Yeah.
question in my mind that he knows who his mother is, who his father is, who his sister is. He reacts, responds, communicates, so on. And the way I understand it, he wasn't exactly there before cannabis.
Right. Right.
I mean, to have a brother that looks you in the eye is a little different than to have a brother that doesn't look you in the eye. That's got to be pretty rewarding. I mean,
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, when I say Calvin was having, a couple-hour episode per day, outside of the episode, he would run back and forth from here, screaming at the top of his lungs, biting himself. Sometimes he would just jump, and it was just constant. It was like you couldn't do anything. We couldn't do anything. It paralyzed our whole family. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't even drive him to therapy, behavior therapy, to work on his behaviors. It was just.
We couldn't even get him in the car.
So you didn't have a lot of interviews in your living room at that time, then?
No. And Calvin would ask to go somewhere, and then we would start to walk outside, and he'd run to the car and start beating his head on the window. And we thought, gosh, what do the neighbors think?
Right, sure. Well, it's a new experience for me to be to stay with a family like you and to experience some of these things. And I'd be lying to say there wasn't a little apprehension or nervousness or whatever. But
Oh, absolutely.
this is a household that I certainly feel comfortable in. We've been in and out at all hours of the night. There's certainly some things to be aware of, or as far as the potential for something to happen. But underneath that, we've got your everyday, average, ordinary, folks,
Right.
family that's happening here. And,
Right.
I think it's remarkable to see the adaptment, the adjustment, the compassion, the way that you all just jump to fill whatever role needs to be filled at the immediate moment. There's no single role being played out by anybody here. From what I've
Right.
witnessed, everybody's doing everything that has to be done, and that's just it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. I think if more families operated like that, we could all get a little more done. I can't help but feel that I've learned a few things as a father and a husband since I've been here. You guys are something else. I guess to wrap this thing up, what's the difference in your feeling today as far as hope versus no hope, or the future for Calvin and the family and so on?
I feel so much better about just day to day. Like I told you, we would drop Calvin off at therapy and then cry the whole way home because he beat his head the whole way there. We'd have to pull over and restrain him, and we really couldn't function. We didn't know what we were going to do. We really didn't. I mean, I caught myself, in places crying, saying, I can't live like this anymore. I can't help him. Everything that I do works for 3 months, and then that's it. It doesn't work anymore. And he's right back to, square one. And no matter what I do, I cannot help this kid, and I can't live this way. I can't. And it wasn't just that, I couldn't shower because I had to constantly be with him 24/7, or I couldn't go to the store, or I couldn't go do this. It was that I was sitting there watching my child suffer day in and day out, and it just took such a heavy toll on all of us. Before Calvin took cannabis, Drew could not have anyone spend the night. She couldn't, because we didn't know if Calvin was going to try to hurt himself, and if someone was going to get in their way, and if one of her friends was going to get hurt. He refused to wear any clothing at all. This just wasn't a place where her friends could come over and hang out. After December of 2012, we couldn't do that. And I think a week into cannabis, Drew said, "Hey, can I have a friend spend the night?" And my immediate response was, "No, like, are you kidding
Hell
me?"
no.
Yeah, no way. And she was like, "Well, Calvin's doing good." And I thought, yeah, Calvin is doing good. And I said, okay. I said, well, we'll try it. I said, but your friend's parents need to pick her up at 9 in the morning just in case. But, Drew has friends spend the night now. Drew can bring friends inside the house, and we're not worried about their safety. We're not worried that, Calvin's going to run through and headbutt her or hurt himself or do something. It's really hard when you have a child that's so self-injurious. It really limits you on everything, and you don't want to say too much, and you don't really want to be exposed because you have this paternal instinct to protect your kids, and you don't want to say, hey, my kid's beating his head so hard I had to call 911, or my son bit himself and hit the wound on his arm needs medical attention. You don't want to do any of that. You want to fix it, and you want to make it right, and you want to help them be successful and be
I,
as
I think a very common misconception there is that this is violent behavior, self-abusive behavior certainly isn't a violent behavior, and that's some of what I've learned this week. That's for sure. The outside world isn't real forgiving of that type of behavior.
Right.
When you're in the grocery store and your kid's wigging out and cussing or whatever the case may be, or people are going to give you that look. They're going to have that reaction, and there's a serious lack of understanding there.
absolutely.
I think that it's important to recognize that small point there. But I guess to wrap this thing up completely, where do you see yourself going with this cannabis oil thing and the children? I mean, is there an end to it? Is this the treatment that you think you're going to be with?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think Calvin will need, I'm not under the influence that Calvin will take an amount of oil and be cured or healed, and by no means is Calvin cured from autism. He still has autism, but he's progressing and he's learning and he's at peace and he's happy and he's functioning, and our family can function again, and we can put everything, in our lives back together again and move forward. And I know, the longer we're in treatment, the more progress I'm going to see.
So we certainly don't have a cure, as they like to say, or anything. But I can't help but deny that this is a successful treatment.
Oh, absolutely.
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 It's going to have its ongoing bumps in the road, but of everything you've tried, it's certainly the most successful.
It is.
From what I understand.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your own
Thank
with
you.
us.